Are you using Databricks for your machine learning project and wondering to know how you can move your solution to production through leveraging DevOps for machine learning or MLOps in Databricks? If yes, then this is the video for Databricks MLOps with GitHub Actions. Let's go! Hello everyone, this is MG and welcome to Databricks MLOps video, which we are going to use GitHub Actions for our CI/CD pipelines to move our machine learning solution from development environment to staging and then finally to production environment. Let's check it out. Alright, let's start with his GitHub repository that I modified and created for this video, which is about how we apply MLOps for Databricks using MLflow and also GitHub Actions for our CI/CD pipelines. So before going forward, let me click on this diagram and explain from here what we are expecting to achieve when we talk about Databricks MLOps through this video and repository. So basically the concept is here. What we're going to do, we will have an Azure Databricks workspace, which we call it our development environment or dev environment. That's the place that our data scientists will have their code, their training code, testing, scoring, model evaluation, so on and so forth. They all will be happening here and their code will be developed and modified here. So this Databricks or Dev Databricks will be integrated to GitHub as a repository. So when GitHub is my source control, I can do pull, push, get the latest codes, modify, push the codes all the way back to the repository. And when I have the new codes, let's say I have a code that can train and register a new model, what I can do as a data scientist, first, I'll say that, well, I came up with a new model and a new code, and I want to register my model in MLflow, and then I have tested it. I think that's a good model to go to production. But of course, before going to production, we should go to Q&A or staging. So I will request in MLflow, and we will see how we can do it, that, hey, this model should go to Q&A and staging. Someone should approve it. And at the same time, what I will do, I will push my code to my source control or repository, which is in GitHub. This will trigger my GitHub Actions CI/CD pipelines, which is based on GitHub Actions. So what will happen after? Then if you have unit test, evaluation codes, whatever that you need to get some approvals before going to Q&A, will be triggered and executed here, and your codes and everything should be in the GitHub repository. And after that, your GitHub Action or CI/CD pipeline will take those, execute them, and upon approval of someone that has been assigned as a person who should approve, it will go to another Databricks workspace, which is a staging environment. And similar to what we did through approval, it can then go to prod environment, which is another workspace. There's another one still left, which is a separate Databricks workspace. And the reason that we're creating this here, if you follow my pointer, each of these Databricks workspaces, dev, staging, or QA, and prod, they can have their own MLflow server, MLflow repository for storing our models. But instead of having this spread MLflow information and tracking, let's create just one Databricks workspace and using it just for MLflow as a centralized model registry. So whatever we create and do the transition to staging, we will refer to the MLflow of this Databricks, not the MLflow of dev. And even when we're staging and we're going to move to prod, so we have to do a transition in MLflow from staging to prod, we are not going to use the MLflow of this Databricks. Again, we refer to this centralized MLflow Databricks, similar to prod as well. So My data scientist won't accidentally change or modify the ML flow, and we will lose the tracking of which model is in prod, which model is in production, because all that tracking and transition mechanism is happening in a separate centralized model registry workspace that not necessarily my data scientists would have access to, or they would have limited access. So that's the concept, basically, to have first access control around our model registry and tracking mechanism. Second, to have one unique and centralized place that we can end-to-end modify all the models that we have developed for different use cases, and what are the stages, whether they are in prod, whether they are in dev, or how many versions are created for that specific, let's say, model or the use cases. So what will trigger my CI/CD pipeline or continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, which is based on GitHub action? There are two things. First, whenever my data scientist will trigger or push a new code to the repository, and if someone approved those codes and go to the master branch, that means that, well, there's a code evaluated and there's a new solution. We're gonna go to staging to be tested before going to production. So that's the way that we can trigger this. The other way that is not covered in this video, but as another option, is when you change a machine learning model status. Let's say I have a model which is in development right now, and then I will move the state of that model from development to staging using MLflow, and we will see that MLflow has a UI by itself. We can change the transition of the models from staging to production. So any change in that model state can also trigger the CI/CD pipeline through webhooks and Azure functions. That can be another story. So now what we're going to do first, if you don't have these resources, you have to deploy it, and I'll also share with you and explain what I use to deploy these codes, Databricks workspaces. And as you can see, my dev workspace, Q&A or staging and prod, I have deployed them in separate resource groups. In dev resource group, Q&A resource group, and prod resource group. They can also be in separate subscription as well, based on how your organization is actually organizing this. And inside that resource group, I have Databricks and Azure Key Vault. And the reason is I need to store some secrets that I can access to, and also Databricks can access to them to leverage them. And the main reason that we need Key Vault for storing the secrets are, first, the way that I am deploying codes from my repository, the way that I'm deploying these codes, my data science code from GitHub repository to, let's say, QA prod, is through using Databricks API. And I am writing down the codes that use Databricks API in GitHub action to deploy the codes to these Databricks workspaces. But actually, in order to use Databricks API, I need to authenticate. So I need a token, a Databricks token, or Azure AD token, or Azure Active Directory token. So for getting Azure AD token, let's say I'm using service principal and having these credentials, I need to store them in an Azure Key Vault. And each environment will have its own Key Vault to get connected, get the tokens or secrets from Key Vault, and talk with Databricks API to deploy these services or notebooks to these services. So now let's get back to the repository. The very first thing that you need to do is creating a service principal in Azure. And the reason is we are going to deploy these services using GitHub, and the server of GitHub that running GitHub actions on my pipelines need to authenticate and have the permission to deploy these for us, right? So we need to create a service principal and give it a permission. Here I'm giving contributor role permission over subscription level to be able to deploy these resources, dev, Q&A, and prod Databricks and Key Vaults in separate resource groups. So if you don't know how to create a service principal, I can show you quickly. Here is my Azure portal. You just go to Azure Active Directory. You have app registration, create a new one, give it a name, let's say test, and click on register. And there you go. So my app is registered already. Here you can see my application ID, object ID, tenant ID. These are the information we need, so copy them. And then you need to create a secret out of it, or client secret out of it. So click on client secret, click a new one. As soon as you click a new one, it will show you a secret value that you need to copy that as well. So I'm not going to create one because I've already did this, so just wanted to show you how you can do it. After copying all this information, this is what we need to do. Now my GitHub needs to know and use that service principal and all the information that we created. So how we can store these information that you just copied safely in my GitHub? So you need to create those secrets here, and this is the way you can do it in GitHub. So you need to click on settings, and then you can see the secret section. So click on it, click on action, because these are the secrets. These service principle gonna be used with my GitHub actions, right? So I need to click on it, and here's the place that you can create your new secret. And what you will do, if you click on new secret, it will ask you that, okay, hey, give me a name. Give this name. You can see mine already created 2 days ago because I did it before recording a video, but you will see nothing. After you create it, you will see this. Let's say I'm gonna create again, right? So I click on here, new Azure credentials, and for the values, this is what you need to copy and paste. And here's actually, I will add the link of the GitHub, the second GitHub that I have added in the description of this video. So you can just copy that. That's like JSON format. Remember I told you that copy this information when you created the service principal. So your secret that you generated, the ID of that service principal, your subscription ID, which is certainly different than mine, your tenant, and the rest is the same. So paste them here. Let's say I'm gonna do that. And if you click on create after changing these values, you're good to go. So I'm not going to do that because I did. And then you will see this gonna be appeared here. So when my GitHub action is gonna deploy these services in Databricks in different resource groups, it will know where it should get the credentials to get authenticated to my Azure subscription and deploy this. So now we have the authentication in place. What's gonna be next? So certainly I want to have a pipeline to deploy these infrastructure for us. These Databricks and their Key Vault. So what you will see after cloning my repository, you will see all these folders, but most likely you won't see the workflow. These are actually my CI/CD pipelines or GitHub actions that gonna be running based on these YAML files. So if you don't see those, that's fine. What you will do, you can click on actions. You won't see anything. You just click on new workflow and then set up workflow yourself. Technically what you need to do, just remove this, copy and paste my YAML files here. So you saw that I have 2 YAML files. Let me open in a new tab. So you can copy this one, first one, let's say this one, you copy all, oh, not all the page, just the YAML file. Let's say I'm gonna copy just the initial lines, paste it here. Of course you need to copy all of that, and that's it. Start commit, and you will do it again for the second YAML file, and then you will see that this folder automatically will be created for you, which are the items we need for our actions. So let's say you did this and now you have these files like myself. What you will do, let's start the infrastructure pipeline. In order to actually start it, what we can do, let's check out the actions. You can see that now, because I have those files, it can understand that I have 2 GitHub actions and I want to start with the infra. I already ran it, but before I showcase you the results, let's see the code, the YAML code that ran this, to understand what is happening when we deploy the infrastructure. So let's get back to the code. This is the code of my infrastructure. And this is the cool part. So the first thing you can see, I give it a name, Databricks Infra Deployment, and I want to trigger this pipeline, right? For now, it is manual. I'm not going to all the time deploy Databricks as soon as someone push a code to master branch, right? So I don't want to have an automated triggering mechanism, just one time, and manually I'm gonna do it, because of course we deploy one time the infrastructure. Unless it's needed, we deploy it again. So we say that on workflow dispatch, that means on manual process, I need to provide some inputs for GitHub. When it's going to deploy, you will see that it's gonna ask me some parameters that I need to fill in. For example, it's gonna ask, what is your resource group name that you wanna create? I give it a name, and this is the default. If I don't give anything, that's the default. Where is the region that you're gonna deploy this? This is the default, but you can change. It's gonna ask you actually when you deploy this, and we will see in action. So the Databricks workspace name, the key vault's name, subscription, of course you need to change it to yours, and deployment mode. You have two choices. If you put initial key vault as the choice of deployment mode, it's gonna deploy Databricks and also deploy key vault with some secrets inside. Why we have two modes? Because if you want to recreate this pipeline again, it will recreate this key vault and also recreate those secrets again, so we will lose them. That's why for the second time, you just say that the deployment mode is Databricks. That means whenever my CI/CD pipeline is going to be happening again, I'm just going to deploy the notebooks and codes of my data science to Q&A and prod environment. I'm not going to redeploy the infrastructure of the key vaults again. So that's just the way that this pipeline has been created, to have the option for you whether you want to deploy mode of Databricks or the key vault. So now when it asks these parameters, and then let's say we go with the default values, but some of them you have to change it, like the default of subscription ID is just 00. You have to change to your subscription ID. And again, I'll show you how you can do it. Then afterwards, here's the place that I'm creating the jobs for my pipeline, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm saying that this pipeline is gonna be running on an Ubuntu machine, so run it on behalf of me, and that's the server that I'm gonna execute these pipelines. And check out the code with the checkout version 2 action, GitHub actions. I want to display some of the environment that I have specified, and here's the inline script that I have for having the AZ version that I'm going to use for this. And then I want to publish or package the artifacts that I want to deploy. Here my artifacts are ARM templates. ARM templates are the way that I can deploy infrastructure, but it can be anything. Later on you will see that we can compile data science codes, or if you have jar file, let's say you want to compile them all, you have to first build your artifacts and then release them or deploy them. And before moving further, let's check out these ARM templates, which are basically the way that I have specified what I'm gonna deploy. So going back to my codes, here are the ARM templates, and here is the Azure deploy Databricks, and also the key vault and the parameters each needed. So you can go through this JSON file that is basically my ARM template, but it is not going to deploy, let's say, virtual network stuff, just a pretty simple Databricks workspace with some parameters inside the given resource group and subscription that we're going to create. Similarly for key vault, we are doing the same. Also, when it creates the key vaults, it creates some secrets inside the key vault. And those secrets are the information related to the service principal that is going to authenticate itself and use API of Databricks. So the initial values are 000. For example, here's a secret for creating, I think, where's the value? Yeah, for the tenant ID, here's the secret for it. For subscription ID, here's the information, client ID. There you go, and the secret of that service principal. So when the key vault are created and the secrets are created, we are going to change this with actual values that I'm going to show you later how. So going back to my pipeline, now we know the ARM templates. That's the time that we deploy our dev, Q&A, and prod. So the resource group given name that we have given, it's going to be used, but we're going to add dev because that's going to be the dev environment. If it's going to be prod, we will add, let's say, prod here. Same thing for key vault and Databricks. And then similarly what we did on the top for the Azure AZ version, downloading the artifacts that we package on the top, give it a name. This is the ARM template that I want to do. And of course, we need to log into Azure using Azure CLI to be able to deploy these services. How we can log into Azure? Remember, we stored these credentials as a secret in GitHub. Now we can refer to them and use them. So with CLI, let's say version 1 here, I am deploying these services with given these values. Sorry, the inline scripts. Similarly for the key vault, I'm doing the same and deploying the secrets there, and that's it. Similarly to Q&A, exactly the same, but you can see the prefixes are different. And lately for prod. So now, how you run this? Let's get back to the actions. You'll see this infra deploy. I'll click on run workflow. This is the place that it's gonna ask you that give me the value of those parameters we specified, and you can see the defaults already shown here. So here I think I added MG, if I'm not mistaken. We can see in the Azure I kept this as is and I changed it with my subscription ID, and you have to start with initialize key vault because that's the first time you're deploying, and just click on run. That's it. What will happen is this. I ran it. It showed me that my build packages on templates were ready to get deployed on dev, Q&A, and prod, and if I click on each of them, you can see that how each single step was getting executed, and you can expand them all. So let's go to my Azure and see what happened. You can see I have MG prod Databricks, MG dev Databricks, QA MG Databricks, and each of them are in a separate resource groups. Let's say clicking on dev, you can see that resource group here is the same name that I given to the Databricks name, but it's in dev resource group. Yours can be in dev subscription. And of course, within that resource group, there's a key vault associated. And I told you this key vault already has some secrets, but they are just 000. You have to change it. So what you need to do, you can create 3 service principals, each of them for different environments. 1 service principal for dev, 1 for Q&A, and 1 for prod. And each service principal, let's say the service principal of dev, will be used to get the token and then use the Databricks API. That's the best practice to do, but what I did, I used the same service principal that I used to deploy these services, which has the contributor role to all subscription, and gave it to this key vault to be used for Databricks API authentication. So if I click on this key vault, if I go to secrets, you can see these secrets already created. With the infra deployment, you have to just change this with the values that you copied and pasted here, right? So for doing so, if you click on any of them, you can click on new version and just add the value there and click on create. That's it. So you can see the first version was 000 because it was the deployment of infra, and then the second one is the actual one that I pasted here. So I did the same for dev. You have to also do the same for prod. The prod key vault, and you have to do the same. This is the prod, and you have to do the same for QA resource group and QA key vault as well. Now, what is next? So let's get back to the code. Now I want to have actually my data science code and stuff in dev environment, do some changes, let's say train a model, register it, and then move it to staging and prod, right? So where are those codes? Those codes, I have added some samples in this repository, but because for the first time your dev environment is empty, so we need to go to our dev environment, clone them, and do some changes and register the models, right? So how we can do it? Then let's get back to my Azure. Let's go to my dev Databricks. This is the place that I'm gonna start. Databricks, my project MG dev, launch the workspace. And there you go. So this workspace is certainly empty. I don't have any codes yet, but what you need to do now, you need to integrate my Databricks with this GitHub repository as my source control. There's a recent nice feature in Databricks called repository, so I can connect to my Git. I have already done this before, but I'm going to show you how I did. So click on add repo. It will ask you that, okay, give me the Git repository URL. So where is that? This is actually the URL of my Git. When you open this GitHub repository, and the URL, it's on the top. Just copy that and then paste it here. Let's say I'll paste it here. Oh, sorry, I pasted the wrong thing. See, there you go. And then it will automatically understand that, oh, it is GitHub, because it can even connect to, let's say, Azure DevOps or other source controls. So you click on create and that's it. But if you click on create, it will tell you an error saying that, well, I need to authenticate your GitHub. You should give me a GitHub token. Then I can create this repo for you. It won't tell the error for me now because I did this before, but if this is the first time you're doing that, it's gonna tell you. So before clicking on create, let's add the token of your Git to Databricks. How you can do it? Go to the setting, user setting, Git integration, and there you go. So I have already added GitHub as my Git provider, and I have added the token here. But what you can do with adding your email and saying that this is GitHub, you need to have the token of GitHub being pasted here. How you can do it? When you have cloned this repository, you have to go to the settings, which is here, settings, and then scroll all the way down, developer settings, and then click on personal access token and generate one. I'm not going to show it because I did, and it's keep it confidential. When you generate it, keep it safe, copy that and come to Databricks, paste it here, click on save, that's it. So when you do that and you come back to repo, add a repo, when you paste your GitHub URL, then it won't ask you any token or generate any errors. Just click on create and that's it. You will see that the name of my repository has been added here, which is the same that I had in GitHub. Let me go back. There you go. Azure Databricks MLOps, Azure Databricks MLOps, and this is the main branch. So as a best practice in MLOps, we don't have to do the changes and develop directly in my main branch. You have to create your own branch, let's say MG, and then push your codes from MG to main branch, and upon approval it will go to main branch and then trigger all the pipelines of MLOps. But here, let's say I'm gonna do a quick change in the main, which is not a best practice, but just for simplicity and make it quick. Click on pull. So what it will do, it will technically pull all the codes that I have from my repository to GitHub, and we can check it out. So clicking on Azure Databricks MLOps, and there you go. All the codes that I had, where is it? Yeah, there you go in my repository. Now I can see them here. You can see the notebooks, my project. This is the place actually I have the data science codes. Here is my training code. Let's click on it and then go through it and do some changes, right? So this is actually a code that will use MLflow as a model registry to track our development process and register the models, but not inside these Databricks, in a centralized Databricks that I'm gonna use just for tracking and also tracking the experiments of MLflow and having my model registered there, which I forgot to actually show you that Databricks, so let me show you that quickly. This is the one I created manually, but it can be created, of course, with the infra code. I named it Databricks Model Registry, and I can launch it later, but I am just using these Databricks in aspect of leveraging MLflow and my UI for tracking the models and experiments. I'm not going to develop any code or any specific deployment here, and there's a limited access to this Databricks. So coming back to my training code, I'm now in my dev Databricks, and as a data scientist, that's the code we have previously, let's say, created. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna train a machine learning model to forecast the wind power with the given information of weather and weather forecast to see what's going to be the forecast daily power output for a wind farm. Let's say it's used turbines, right? And we have some specific features like the temperature, wind direction, speed, which are of course very effective in the amount of power we can generate with that wind farm. The data set is coming from this GitHub, but it can come from your prod data source like storage, prod tables, which you have just read access, or coming from a sample that has been moved from prod to dev environment, so you can get connected to that. So as an example, I'm reading the CSV file from this GitHub, and then I have some functions to get the training data, specifying the dates that I want to have as training data, and then specifying the dates that I want to use for validating the model, and then get the weather data and forecast. So the concept is pretty simple. Let's actually run it together. And I have a cluster already created before. And let's take a look. Here's the data, the temperature, all these features, and this is what we're going to predict. So what we are going to create right now, a very simple model. It's a neural network with just one layer, one hidden layer I mean, and using realize activation function, and here's the optimizer and MSE as my loss, and just compiling it. So I'm using abstracted layer of TensorFlow through Keras, and then running this. Now it will create a function that can return a model for me with model.fit. So now what I'm gonna do, I want to, let's say now, train the model, register the model using MLflow, and not the MLflow of this Databricks workspace, the MLflow of the centralized workspace, which is here. That's another Databricks. So the question is it possible to connect to MLflow of another Databricks from this Databricks? And the answer is yes, but you have to tell this Databricks which MLflow of another Databricks you're going to connect to and use it as your centralized model registry. Here's the process you need to do. So you need to use Databricks CLI, which is using also Databricks API, to put some secrets inside your dev, Q&A, and prod environment that they can use those secrets to connect to the centralized MLflow, which is another Databricks. What are those secrets? I'm going to show you. For putting some secrets in Databricks, you need to first create a scope. Let's give it a name. I call it model registry. That can be anything. And then inside this scope, we're going to put some credentials, which we call it here secrets. You should give it a name. So I say that, hey, create a secret inside the scope that I created on the top. Give it a name. This is token. I'm going to tell you what token is. And here's the value. And that's a string value. So what is this? This token is actually the Databricks token of my centralized MLflow, which is this one. Let me show you actually. This is Databricks model registry. I need to connect to this Databricks to push everything and use it as my centralized MLflow. So of course I need to know the token of this to connect to that. And you know how to create a token in Databricks, right? So come to this model registry, click on settings, user settings, generate a token, and just copy that. That's it. I did one and paste it here. Now I'm coming back to the dev Databricks. The second thing is the workspace ID. How you can grab the workspace ID? It is actually a part of your workspace URL. And again, it is related to the centralized model registry Databricks, which is here. So if you see the URL on the top, you can see that the URL starts with some numbers and then .azuredatabricks.net dash question mark O or 0, I think, oh, it's O, equal, there's a number. That number after equal is your workspace ID. So you copy that. And the third thing is the URL of your workspace, which the workspace of centralized registry. Again, everything is related to this workspace, which is model registry workspace. And it's just the URL of this Databricks, which start with HTTPS adb blah 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 .azuredatabricks.net. That's it. So these are the secrets you need to put in dev, Q&A, and prod Databricks. So 3 Databricks. But how I put them there? These are actually bash command. You can use bash command line in your machine, your laptop. But what I do even simpler, I use the Cloud Shell. So I open the Cloud Shell. The first thing that you need to do is Databricks config token. You need to connect to a Databricks to create some secrets inside, right? So when I do this, that means that I'm gonna use Databricks CLI. So here Bash is understanding that, and then it is asking me which Databricks you're gonna connect to create those secrets inside. So now I'm gonna connect to Dev Databricks, because those secrets that now we know what are those secrets, I want to store them as a secret in Dev Databricks. And I have to do the same for Q&A and prod, but let's start with dev. So that's my dev environment. It is asking me, give me the URL. I copy the URL of my Databricks of dev. Let me copy that with the organization ID as well. I mean the number after O, the URL, keep it. Click on enter, and then it will ask me, okay, give me a token to connect to this. You know how to create a token, right? So similarly, what we did in the model registry Databricks, in Dev Databricks as well, I need to also create a token. So settings, user settings, create a token, copy that, and then paste it here. After that, let's say for example I pasted. After that, you are ready to create those secrets inside Dev Databricks. How? Just technically copy those. Okay, let me check which. Okay, I need to go back to my code. It was in repo. Okay, in the wrong folder. There you go. So now I need to just copy these. So we one by one from 4th to 7th to create the scope, and then create all these secrets that we have copied the values before. So one by one, go back and create them. Let's say first one, creating the token of my model registry Databricks. Click on paste and hit enter. Then copy the second one, third one, so on and so forth. After you're done, you just hit for dev. You have to also push these secrets to Q&A Databricks and Prod Databricks too. How? Do from beginning. So paste this first thing that we pasted. It's gonna ask me, okay, which Databricks you want to put those secrets. Now is my, let's say, Q&A Databricks. So go to Q&A Databricks. Let's say here's a Q&A. Now open that and then paste the URL of that Q&A here, and then copy all those secrets again, the same thing to Q&A and then to prod. These are just one time. Now I am explaining how you set up one time the infrastructure for MLOps. You don't need to do it again, but it is a must to do. And that's it. So I just added quickly here what you need to do. Just copy them from here and run it in Bash, and good to go. So now my dev environment, which is the Dev Databricks, can connect to the MLflow of another Databricks, which is the model registry Databricks. How? Just here simply say that this is my model registry. Where did I grab it? That's actually the scope that if you choose, let's say, test, another name, you have to type test here as well, right? And then here are the prefix of my secrets. So the prefix is the same, I'm just changing the name after. So I chose the same name as the name of the scope. That's why here again is the same name that I have copied. And clicking, and if you say MLflow.set, that means now you're connecting to another Databricks workspace MLflow. Let's do this. All done. Did we run it? Yes, we did. And now we're gonna start training data and training my model with autolog. Autolog in AutoML will automatically capture the model parameters, metrics, and artifacts, and also the source code. I'm training the model using Keras, and I will capture the run ID so I know what's going to be the run ID later. Let's run this. You can see the epochs are getting started. Might take a couple of seconds. There you go, it's all done. And we also need to know what is the run ID so later we can deploy the model or score the model. Let's check what is the run ID. Okay, we'll come back to this. Now we need to register a model with MLflow. So I'm happy with this model. I'm going to register it and call it power forecasting model, right? So give it a name. Perfect. And here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to register a model with the name that I've specified here. So with the run ID and the artifact path, which by default goes to model, and registering it. And where does it register this model in the MLflow of this workspace? No, it is actually moving to the MLflow of another Databricks workspace. That's how we can see it's copying the files. Let's check it out. So let's check our other Databricks that we're using the MLflow of it. Let's switch. Here's actually my, look, there's a different workspace. It's called Model Registry Databricks. And if I switch it to machine learning and then clicking on models, there you go, power forecasting model. And here's the latest version because I ran it multiple times before recording a call, and the third one just got created right now with the time that I'm recording this video, which is another Databricks workspace. That's awesome. And if I click on it, let's see, this is the version we just ran it together. You can see that it is not even in staging or prod because we just created. And if you click on source, you can even see, awesome, the source codes and everything getting created here, the conda YAML file requirements, so I can check it out. That's perfect. Going back to my dev Databricks, the place that I was executing the codes to do the rest. So let me go to the repo. Let's see where I am. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong one. I need to go, yeah, this is my dev repos. I was here, I think. Notebooks, project, there you go. Let me scroll down. So that was the place we registered the model in another MLflow registry. And when you actually register the model, it might take a couple of seconds usually, but to just make sure that your model is ready and registered, just run this code. It's gonna tell you the status is ready. So you have registered the model, and we checked that already in MLflow in another Databricks. Now, I am the data scientist. I'm happy with the model. Let's say I evaluated the model and I registered in MLflow, and now I think that's the time I want to move it to staging, which is the place, or QA. I'm gonna test the solution there. If it's performing properly, then we push it to production. So what should I do? The first thing that I can do is, now I have my, that's a different Databricks workspace. That's my model register workspace. This is the place that the model got registered. I click on the model and version 3. I can request that, well, I want to request transitioning this model to a staging. And I say, this is a good one, I think. Let's move it to Q&A, right? So I click on OK. And then you will see that MG has requested to move this to staging. And here I can approve by myself because I do have the permission, but you can set up the permission later to make sure that some people can just request and they cannot approve. So now I can keep the team or person, admin or data science lead who is responsible for checking this before moving to different environments, that hey, I have a request. If we can approve, we can push the model to staging. So with just having this request, or as soon as, let's say I click on approve, we can automatically trigger the CI/CD pipeline in GitHub as well through webhook that can call the Azure function, and Azure function can trigger a pipeline. But here we said that what we're going to cover is triggering CI/CD pipelines based on a push to a code repository. So is it enough to just say that I have requested to go to staging? One thing is still left. I have to also push the codes that I have trained, evaluated the models to my repository, so someone can check, someone can see, let's say if I have unit test, what are the test results before approving this, right? So let's go back to my development environment, which is here. Now we ran this and we have developed our training code. Also, I want to have the scoring code, how we score this model. So that's why there's a second file here. What it does, so let's actually run it together and test it. It will parameterize this notebook first. Where are you going to test this model? Is it in a staging environment or prod? And the reason that we need to have this is because we can tell MLflow that try the staging model or try the production model for testing. Now here I'm importing MLflow, the same thing, the registry. I'm connecting to another Databricks workspace because the model is there and I want to have it call this model and do prediction. This is the name of the model. And remember, there was a run ID associated when we were training the model. That's why we need to have it. So let me get back to the previous notebook to copy that run ID that we just executed the code. Let me scroll down. I think it was somewhere here that there you go. Let me copy that. Scoring and paste it here. There you go. The rest is the same that we talked about it. Model name means we're gonna actually go with the staging. Oh, actually, let's parameterize this, not hard code it here, so we can test this in prod as well. So instead, what I can do, similar to what we have did here, let me make it parameterized. We call it model stage. And where this parameter is coming from, I'm gonna tell you how. So the model stage will come from the choice of the user, which here is staging, which is variable of the Databricks notebook. So the user has specified the input here, and how we can get this input, this is how we can get it. We're gonna use dbutils widgets get the model stage. So if a staging is chosen, the outcome going to be staging. If it's production, the outcome going to be production. And we're going to plot to see the predicted value versus the real value to check out the performance of the model. And this is the function that does the forecast. Let's see how we can do it. We call it MLflow. We say that get the latest version of the given model name, and the model stage here is a staging. And then with the given model name and a stage, we got to create the URI, and then we load this through a simple Python function that MLflow provide as a wrapper around the registered model that we can do just .predict. We call this model .predict. This is the given input data, and these are the predictions, and we can use the plot function that we specified to plot the predicted value versus true value. Let's actually do a quick check. Let's run this. And then now we have the function specified. We can just call them here with the given input data set, which is again coming from the same source. There you go. This is the true value and predicted value. Well, not that close, but regardless of the results, we are just doing a quick test with the model and sample data set to make sure the scoring code is working properly. Now, remember we requested this model to move to another stage, but I mentioned that that's not enough. We also have to move our codes to our GitHub repository, which is here as well. So how we can do it? We are in the repo, right? And we did some changes in these codes. That's the time to push the changes back to our code repository. How we can do it? Again, it's not the best practice to do the change in main, but for now that's fine. We just want to do a quick test. So Databricks repo automatically understood that we just did a very quick change. We changed the run ID in the line of a code, as you remember, which is okay. That was the test we were doing. So this is how then we can push this to our repository. We say that um, training code update. This is what we did. Training code updated. Description is optional. Commit and push. Let's see what's gonna happen. Successfully committed and push changes to the main, again, which is not a best practice. It should through approval go to main, but let's say someone has approved, it went to the main, and what's gonna happen? Let's quickly go to our pipeline, to our DevOps. You can see actions. Oh, there is a new pipeline that got triggered, and it is actually moving our code from dev to Q&A and prod based on approvals. Let's check it out. It is using the Databricks CLI pipeline. I'm gonna tell you how this pipeline is developed, but it is executed now. Let's see what it's doing. So you can see that from the dev, I'm gonna move to Q&A and prod, and you'll see it's gonna ask an approval needed for moving those. So let's see what the dev is doing. So it's downloading the artifacts. What I'm deploying, I'm moving Databricks notebooks to Q&A or staging. I'm creating clusters there. Oh, it moved all of them. Okay, I am creating some jobs. And what is jobs in Databricks? Job is a way that you can schedule Databricks notebooks. And I want to schedule this scoring. What we did, let's say here, I want to score this actually running, let's say every night, because I want to do batch prediction. Okay, so I need to create it as a job. So I need to create a job in Databricks, and maybe if you have initial scripts, you can deploy them there. Deploying the scripts, all these evaluation code, scoring code, we have to move them to staging. And then when I have these packaged artifacts, that's the time we can deploy them. So I need to log in. It's not going to deploy Databricks, it's just going to deploy the artifacts to Databricks, all those notebooks, clusters that I told you about. And it will certainly use the Databricks API using the key vault secrets and then deploy the rest. So let's wait for it to get finished, and then we will come back to the results. So let's wait a bit. There you go. Before moving everything to staging, it is saying that someone needs to review this. So I have been actually requested to review this. You can assign anyone to review, and I'm going to tell you how you can do it in GitHub, but you can see it won't move to Q&A and prod before I approve it. So let's open the Q&A, waiting for review. Staging needs approval to start, but it's not MG. It is actually telling that, okay, let me go back to the action, training code updated. It's telling me that another person is needed. This is the person that I specified, which is again me with another GitHub account, that I need to come back with this GitHub account and approve these codes and changes. This is the way that you can notify, let's say, your data science team lead that someone is assigned to check the codes before go to staging and production. So that person should already receive an email. So let me show you what email you're gonna receive. Let me open mine and show you quickly. This is what you will see, that your review was requested to deploy. So MG has requested me to check out before going to staging. And then I can click on review, but it is using the same account, so I need to log out and log in again. There you go. I switch now to the second account in GitHub that I can approve this. So I go there, review deployments. I'm gonna say, let's say I have checked the codes. Let's say you have a specified unit test. I saw the results, I saw the model evaluation, and even I saw that there is a model transition request in my Databricks MLflow that needs my approval. So before approving that, I check the source run, and now I'm here checking the source codes in the repository, so I can approve the staging, and I'm happy to move forward. So let's do this. Approve and deploy. Now it says that MG just approved to go to staging, and then I'll show you actually the code that is doing this movement. But let's wait a bit, see what's gonna happen, and see how it goes to prod. There you go, I'm resuming the recording after a 1 minute pause, and it is going to prod right now. But am I going to just approve it right now? Of course, I'm gonna do some further checks and check out and see how the model is performing, right? So now the codes, artifacts, everything should be moved to staging. Well, let's check it out. I have to open the staging Databricks. So let's go to my Databricks, sorry, my Azure portal. Let's close that. You can see I have my Q&A Databricks, which was empty. We created with the infra code. There was nothing there, and let's see if there are some stuff there. If I click on workspace, there you go. There's a project created by my GitHub action, and inside that, those files that we changed are now deployed in my Databricks. Why the training code is again moved to staging? Because again, we are not going with just model-centric approach for MLOps. MLOps is not just moving the model. We need to move model and all the artifacts around. One of them is training code, because let's say you want to do retraining of the model on a scheduled basis or event basis, and you need to have retraining code. So you have to test your retraining code in a staging environment, which usually has access to even prod data, because a staging environment is very similar to prod, and that's a situation we're gonna test the solution there and test the returning code too. But for now, we just want to test, let's say, scoring.py. And of course, there's a cluster created as well using my GitHub action CI/CD pipeline. You can see it's called small. We can, let's say, run it. We could have asked GitHub to actually trigger to run, but let's make it manual right now to just show you. But we can make everything here automated, because usually we are not going to touch any code or any change in the staging. We have to do any change again from dev, and the staging is just for testing, not changing anything. So what I'm gonna do, I'm not going to change any code here. We could automatically trigger this notebook again as a job, but just to show you, I want to do it manually when this cluster is ready, to make sure the model is still performing and doing the same results what we did in dev before going to production. So let's wait for this cluster to be ready, and I'm gonna pause recording and resume after. Finally, the cluster is ready. So what we're gonna do, test evaluation again, just in staging environment. Here we could have some more unit tests for the codes, data, model, much more complicated than what we're showcasing, but just make it simple. We're just going to plot the performance of the prediction, that's it. So the model gonna be used, nothing going to be changed again in staging. So we run as is, and we just need to do the prediction and compare it with the actual value to see how the model is performing. Again, this is a staging Databricks, and it is calling the model an MLflow of another Databricks, which is that centralized model registry Databricks. And there you go. It seems like this is what we exactly see in another Databricks workspace, which was dev, and now we saw the same in staging. So I think, again, these unit tests can be happening here, or even in GitHub CI/CD pipeline, we can execute your unit tests and check the results before approving. I think it's good to go to production. So we should be able to approve it. And we saw that someone was actually asking me in MLflow that, hey, I want to push some model to staging and prod, right? So I want to approve this. I approved it is good, and I already approved this in GitHub too, right? And I say that, well, it was great, right? So I click on confirm. Now this model is in staging. So MG has approved moving to staging. And then when I approve the code, I can tell my data scientist that, well, the code got approved in staging, but now it's not going to the prod yet. So we can do, say that, again, the same data scientist can say, or anyone else, we check the results in staging too, I think it can go to production. So the request now has been created. Request from staging to prod has been created. Before approving, let's go and check the results in GitHub. Let's open my GitHub action. There you go. It is waiting for approval. If you have checked everything, you're happy with the staging results and you want to approve this, then do it. You click on review penny deployment. Review needed by me. I reviewed it. Good to go. Approve and deploy. So let's see what's gonna happen. Get back to the action and the CI/CD pipeline. There you go. Let's pause the recording and see what's gonna happen when this stage is over. And now since we have approved to deploy the prod, there you go. It's done now. You can see that MG approved the staging and then he approved the prod. You can also get back to MLflow. And remember that we requested moving to prod. We can say approve. We checked everything and now this model can go to production. And this step that I did just manually approving, moving to production, moving to staging, all of them can be automated and coded. So when in GitHub, we are moving dev, Q&A, and prod, at the same time we can code MLflow that do these state changes. So I'm just doing it manually right now to show you in action and visualize it, how this transition is happening, but you can do fully automate this using MLflow API and Databricks API. So going back to my GitHub to make sure the pipeline is all done successfully. Perfect, everything is over. We move from dev, Q&A, and prod, and let's see what happened to prod. So let's open prod Databricks to make sure the codes are moved there, and we can do scoring there automatically. So let's open my prod sub resource group. There is a prod Databricks there. Launch Databricks. And clicking on my email. Similar to what we did in staging, we have to see the same in prod, right? So in workspace, there you go. There is a folder called my project and my codes has been moved here. There should be a cluster already created for me, exactly like what we saw in staging, so we can run it as well through code, but here I'm doing manually. And also there is a job created to run this scoring. Remember, we are scoring the model to do the prediction. Let's say I want to do it automatically, batch prediction per night, per day, because now we're in prod, we need to automate it, right? So I'm gonna show you how I coded the job and my GitHub actions ran this and the job is already created. So if I go to workflow of my prod Databricks, you can see that there's a job which is used as small cluster that it was created again using GitHub, and you can see that it is running. Let me show you the details. It is running the scoring code that is under my project folder, which is here. We just saw that, and we can schedule it as well, or trigger it right now to see the prediction happening every night automated. We can add a schedule. We can actually code this schedule, but I didn't to do it here, for example, manually to show you. Specify the schedule. What's gonna happen? This scoring file gonna be happening in prod to do the prediction, and we already tested in staging, but let's wait for this cluster to be ready just for the last time, make sure it can be running in prod. But again, this is not the time for testing. When we come here, this code should be automatically running by itself or scheduled by itself. But again, I'm just showing you to make sure the code and everything has been moved here successfully, and it can load the model again. Why? Because they're all referring to the same model registry, which is another Databricks. That's why wherever I move, whether staging, Q&A, and prod, I always refer to that model registry Databricks, and I should have access to that MLflow, grab the model, and do the scoring in any environment, which is fantastic. So let's wait for this cluster. Oh, there you go. I think it is ready now. Okay. And remember, this time I want to execute this, attach and run. This time we are in production, so I want to use production as the model stage. But again, this is a variable in a notebook that can be added in GitHub action, but here we are doing manually, which is practically not we do that anything manual in prod, but just to show you how it works. Or actually, let's running it here. Let me run it through the job. We want to automate this, right? So workflow, here's the job. Let me run right now. Okay, it is running. Let's check. Okay, you see there's a run created. Oh, it failed. Let me check. Okay, now the cluster is ready. Let me run it again to make sure it is running. Okay, let's wait for it. You can see that the job now is running manually right now, but again, it can be scheduled. And let's see if it can do the prediction and scoring for us properly. Let me pause the recording and I will resume recording when the results are ready. There you go. Now is the result ready, and you can see it's even performing properly in production as well. The reason that it failed because I have to specify the parameter model stage in production that I didn't, and now it is in production. Again, you're not going to specify these parameters manually. They can be called from GitHub, but just want to show you how I did manually. When you want to run this job, you can click on run with different pipeline. You can say my model stage, which was the parameter we specified in the code. I want to have it as production. Oh, sorry. And that's it. You just click on run and succeed it and perform properly. So now we were able to move the code from dev to staging. We test that there, and now we to prod. It tests that there, and we can now automate it. But how GitHub Actions move all these codes, how it created the compute for me automatically, how it created the job for me, how did I specify it? So let's check it out, and let's get back to my GitHub and check out the code of this CI/CD. So we have two GitHub actions, right? One of them was for infra deployment, and the other one was the one that moved everything to dev, Q&A, and prod, the codes stuff. Let's check the code of this one. If I go to code, GitHub workflow, CI/CD, it's very similar to what we discussed and covered in infra deployment, but here's just some changes. First, the name is different, obviously. How we trigger this pipeline: as soon as someone push any code in main branch, that means my data scientist has developed a new code, new solution. That's the time to push it to staging and check. If you're okay, then we push it to prod. So that's another triggering mechanism. I have specified here, and then I'm saying that I want to push these codes to Databricks. These are the codes of my data scientists that they have pushed to notebooks.projects. Let's go back. This is notebooks, my projects, and these are the codes. So I'm referring to those, CI/CD. And then I'm specifying that, okay, where you want to deploy these codes in Databricks. I want to say that I want to create a folder in Databricks called my project and deploy all those codes from repository of GitHub to Databricks under this folder. That's why in all Databrickses, when I was in staging or prod Databricks, you can see that in workspace there's a folder called my project created, and the notebooks are deployed there, because actually I have specified them in the YAML file. For the rest, these are not going to be used because we are not going to deploy this infrastructure again, so it's going to be ignored. And then that's the time. So I already explained that how we are creating a package out of these components, like the ARM templates, how we create the clusters. Remember, automatically I created a cluster using GitHub Action. I have specified a JSON file that I have defined that this is a cluster I want to create with this number of nodes, this machine type I'm going to show you, but of course I need to refer to them as my artifacts. The notebooks that I'm going to deploy, the job that you saw that it was created automatically for automatically doing a scoring every night or every night that I showed you, that we manually triggered it. So let's check out, for example, the latest one, prod, because it's exactly the same like Q&A and staging. So for deploying to the prod, we are saying that we're going to make sure first the Q&A is done. We need to have an Ubuntu machine in the prod environment. We want to have this resource group, workspace name, key vault. We are specifying them because we need to have them when we deploy. And then the artifacts that we specified on the top, the ARM templates, again, not going to be used here, but Databricks cluster, notebooks and stuff, we're going to download them to deploy them. So after having all, this is the place that I'm gonna deploy. There we go. So Databricks clusters. I'm saying that use Databricks API that I have specified in .sh file to deploy the clusters. We can check it out with the given tenant ID and secrets that we have specified in Azure credentials. Then for the notebook, we do the same. We call that another sh file to deploy it using bash command, using Databricks API, and similar to jobs. So I'm calling the related notebooks or codes inside my GitHub workspace. Jobs, deploy notebooks, deploy clusters, and any scripts here I didn't have any specific, but you can do. So let's check out these files, how they are doing the deployment. If I go all the way back to my codes and then clicking on deployment script, there you go. I have clusters, scripts, jobs, notebooks. Let's check out the cluster. We can say that it is accepting some inputs, all those credentials we saved before, and then using the Databricks API, using the service principal we have identified for Azure AD. We go to the Databricks workspace, and then we say that deploy this cluster with the specific information we are specifying. And I'm going to show you that the JSON file that specifies the configurations of the clusters that we're going to deploy here using Databricks API, we give it a name from that file, and we do the curl to use Databricks API, and the cluster is created. So let's check out the Databricks JSON file, that the cluster JSON file that specifies the cluster configurations that this code is using them to deploy. So in my code, clusters, there you go, there's a JSON file. Here's my cluster. Remember when in Databricks it was a cluster called a small automatically created? That's because of this. One node, this is the version, single node, and the rest. So that was about cluster. Very similar to the rest. How I created the job using Databricks API, and I'm referring to the job JSON file that I have specified. Let me show you. In my jobs, there's another JSON file. I'm saying that, hey, go and grab that scoring notebook and create a cluster, a job out of it using this cluster. And even here you can add the schedule and run it daily, weekly. What else? And I think the last one, the notebooks that I deployed. So this code is again using Databricks API to deploy them if there are SQL, so on and so forth. But here for me it's just Python, and where the codes are, the notebooks are inside these notebooks. So go ahead, grab them, and through Databricks API deploy them in Q&A or prod environment. So one thing left, and then we can wrap up the video. So now we know what we did, how we moved the code from dev to staging and prod. But how do we set up approvals? When it hit to the staging and prod, we saw that it was asking that MG should approve before go to staging and prod. How we set it in GitHub? First, you need to create the environments, call it prod and staging. That's a logical definition in GitHub, and say that whoever want to deploy anything to any of these environments, you have to ask MG to approve, right? So in order to create these environments, this is what I did before executing all these codes. You should go to setting. Okay, let me go back to the code. Okay, I have to switch back to the MG account, which is the owner of the repository, to be able to create those environments. So let me switch so there you go. I switch my accounts right now to MG, and if you go to the settings, then here click on environments, you can see I have specified 2 environments. Let's say there's nothing here for you and you're gonna create prod and staging. You click on prod, new environment, give it a name. Let's say I want to give it test, configure the environment, and here you can say that for this environment I require reviewers. Then you can add people. Here I can add, let's say, Muhammad, myself, or anyone else. You need to write down the full name as one of the collaborators here, and you can set up a timer or just the required viewers, up to 6 or more. And that's it. You click on save. This is what you will see. You come to environment, you see that prod or staging is created, and protection rule is there, which is required approval. So I want to delete. That's why when I was creating this CI/CD pipeline, I said that when you want to go to Q&A, deploy to the staging environment, so it will automatically know that, oh, okay, that's the staging, then MG should approve it. And that's it. So just in 1 minute, very quickly, what we did, let's come back to this again. So I was in dev environment. I created some code with some changes and trained a model, and I registered it using MLflow to another Databricks MLflow, which was this one. Then I requested here, hey, I want to move this to staging, and I requested here, and also I moved my code to GitHub. So I push it to it got approved to the main branch, and this automatically triggered my GitHub action to move this to staging, but it stopped here because it should be approved. So another MG came here to do the approval. I checked the codes in GitHub, and you can check the unit result test, for example. And at the same time, I saw that in here, there's a model transitioning request to staging. So I approved it, and here I approved the codes. The code went to Q&A. We saw the results, and then it wanted to move to prod. I saw a request here saying that, well, from staging to prod in MLflow, we're gonna move, and also I checked the codes and results again because of this GitHub. I approved, so the codes from GitHub got deployed again to prod, and it was a job created here to automatically do prediction with batch to productionize the outcome and automate it. And that's it. So if I do any change again, all just in dev, nothing gonna be changed in the staging and prod. Change is gonna be initiated from here, and all the way from here go to prod. And all these transition process gonna be stored and tracked in a separate Databricks that has the MLflow there, and we just saw and check everything. It was just a batch example, but of course you can do even real time. So let's say here I'm Q&A, or let's say here's prod. You can code actually that do a real-time API for this model. How we can do it? So let me go to the place that I have the model registered. There you go. Here's my model. Well, we successfully pushed it to production for version 3. You can use model for inference. Again, you can code, but here I'm just showing you. This is for the batch what we did, but for real time, you can say click on enable serving. What it will do on backend, it will create a cluster with one node for you, and the node you can specify, and it will give you URL that, hey, whenever you call this URL, it's like an API call. Give me the data frame like pandas. I will return you back the prediction, which is the power of a wind farm for the future. And that's it.
That's all, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Quick question, MG. Can I use Azure DevOps instead of GitHub Actions for my CI/CD pipelines?
Of course you can, definitely.
And can I use Azure Machine Learning instead of MLflow for tracking and also my model repository? And even from Azure Machine Learning, I can deploy my model there, but they're still being in Databricks.
Absolutely. These are all different choices based on your requirements and preferences. So keep us posted what else you would like to know, and make sure you're staying tuned for upcoming videos. See you later.